So we're going to jump back into Lisa Allen's testimony to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry and discussing the report that she made in the case of Suzanne Palmer, a false accounting report, and some of the things mentioned in the interview, notably the issues with Horizon as well as the help desk calls, are both absent from this report. But why aren't they there? Let's find out and jump into the inquiry.
Could we have on screen, please, document reference POL 53007. This is the report you completed for legal services in Mrs. Palmer's case. Going please to page 6 of this document. Towards the bottom, we see your name and the date of the report, the 20th of February 2006.
Yeah.
Going back please to the first page and scrolling down a little please. You set out, first of all, some of the background to the interview you conducted. Going over the page, please, and about halfway down, you start to address the interview of the 6th of February 2006. And you say in that paragraph that you are enclosing a transcript of the interview. So is it right that you provided the criminal law team with a transcript of the interview that we've just looked at?
I did, yes.
Going over the page, please. The last paragraph. Mrs. Palmer was asked to explain the entries made on the daily record sheets. She claimed that the £2,500 entry that there is each day is related to scratch card error notices. Some months ago now, she received a number of error notices related to scratch cards. She was unsure of why she had received them and requested assistance from the post office for dealing with this problem. Nobody visited the office, and she was informed that they had to be brought to account immediately.
So that's an admission there that she's asking for help and no one's actually gone to help her. Well, if you did think someone was doing wrong, then you would go to help because it had then become obvious you'd actually gain more evidence for your case if these were being stolen or something, or the money was being stolen. You'd actually have more of an idea if you actually went to try and help sort it out. Equally, if there was a problem that wasn't related to them being stolen, you're more likely to discover it if you actually go and help the person who's asking for help with these error notices.
As instructed, Mrs. Palmer processed the error notices. In order to do so, as she did not have sufficient funds to pay for the error notices, she was carrying the amount of £2,500 in her daily cash on hand. She claimed
So essentially, she would have actually paid the money if she'd had it, even though she didn't owe it.
that she believed a further error notice would be received and that it would compensate for the loss. To date, this has not been the case. Then going over the page, please, to the last paragraph. Scrolling down, please. At the present time, it is not known when the error notices were processed, so I am unable to identify the date at which Mrs. Palmer inflated her cash on hand figure by £2,500. Again, she did not have the funds to cover this and continually accounted for this in the cash, hoping for a compensating error notice. However, she admitted that error notices were usually received within 8 weeks, and she has been holding this amount for many months.
And by not helping sub-postmasters in this regard and knowing that they have to bounce to open up and knowing that they have to open up to have any hope of not only maintaining the business, but actually paying back these shortfalls, they've put them in the position of essentially forcing them into a very tricky position where it's then leading, in some cases, to them false accounting, but they're being led down this path by not being helped when they're asked for it by the post office.
You've had a chance to read this report for the purposes of preparing your statement. Would you agree that there is no reference in this report to the wider technical problems and balancing issues which Mrs. Palmer raised in her interview with you?
Not within the report there aren't, but there are, obviously the tape transcript was provided for the legal team and the designated prosecution authority to consider when making their decision.
Why didn't you include them in the report, knowing that this would be the key document considered by the criminal law team when they advised on charge and prosecution?
Because at the time I didn't believe there was an issue with the Horizon system. I believe that the one-off incident in August was a one-off, And the issues, as explained with the balancing up and down, were compensating errors, mistakes with counting cash or stock.
But even if you don't believe there's an issue with Horizon, which I guess at the time, being an investigator, let's say, fair enough, you can still mention in the investigator's report that that is a claim of the person being accused. There's no reason to omit it completely, as far as I can tell.
You say in your statement at paragraph 90 that you do not recall whether system issues reported by Mrs. Palmer were recorded on any help desk logs. There is no reference in this report to you having made any inquiries of any helplines by this stage. We'll come on to what happened later. Why didn't you contact the helplines, specifically the NBSC and Horizon Help Desk, following your interview with Mrs. Palmer and before submitting your report to the criminal law team?
Obviously, this was almost 18 years ago now, so it's quite hard to recall back then. But I believe the audit shortage itself was explained as in the £9,000 odd pounds of non-accounting for sales of scratch cards, money used to put into the personal ATM machine, and obviously the transaction correction notices. So as far as the way I viewed it, the loss was accounted for, if that makes sense.
Did you consider seeking ARQ data from Fujitsu following your interview with Mrs. Palmer and before submitting your report to the criminal law team?
I don't think I obtained the logs before, but I do think I obtained them after.
We'll come on to what was obtained for the trial in due course, but just in terms of this stage, before submitting your report to the criminal law team, did it occur to you or did you consider whether you should be asking Fujitsu for ARQ data?
I don't recall what I was thinking at that time.
What would have made these investigations a lot more transparent is these kinds of decisions being recorded in the investigator's report. So, some kind of process to say, not that necessarily, even though it would probably have been better if they'd always requested ARQ data, but even the confines that they were, to have to note in the investigator's report, I have requested ARQ data for X because of X, Y, and Z, and I have not requested ARQ data for X because of X, Y, and Z. That would then make these cases a lot easier to review in the future, as well as providing a record of why, when, and how decisions were made, so that they could then be reviewed.
Given what Mrs. Palmer was telling you about the technical difficulties she was experiencing and the balancing problems she was having, did you consider raising with anyone the question of whether there should be any investigation into the operation of the Horizon system in Mrs. Palmer's branch?
No.
So I wonder if that's a convenient moment for the morning break.
Yes, and are we on a reasonable time schedule?
Yes, sir, we are.
Very good. Do you want 15 minutes?
Just 15 minutes, please, sir.
So what time will that be, please?
I think that takes us to 25 to...
Yeah, fine. 25 to 12 then, please.
Thank you, sir.